Hello, and welcome to Evolve Business with Boatema. My name, of course, is Boatema. A special thanks goes to our proud sponsor, Chic by Siba, for this lovely outfit. Our topic for tonight is company secretaries, the new qualifications for company secretaries, and generally the roles of company secretaries in any business. Tonight, we are joined by Mr. Hassan Rashad. Hassan is a chartered secretary, and he will be sharing with us insights on company secretariatship and helping us to address the issue for the day by a viewer who sent in the letter. Dear Evolve Business, I am Kwabna Entry. In 2018, I registered a limited liability company at the company's registry with my mother as my company secretary. A few weeks ago, a friend and I tried to register another company to pursue a new opportunity, and I wanted to use my mother again as the secretary of the new company. I have been told that my mother can no longer be my company secretary because of some new qualifications. My questions are: 1. What are these new qualifications for company secretaries? 2. What does a company secretary do that my mother cannot do for my company? And 3. What of my existing company? Do I need to meet the new requirements for company secretaries for that one too? Kwabena. So Hassan, Kwabena is saying that in 2018 he was able to register a company with his mother acting as his company secretary. He doesn't tell us what qualification his mother has. I don't know if, like me, his mom is a teacher or his mom has a different trader or a different qualification. But then he's saying that 2018 he was able to register a company with his mother as a company secretary. He's asking what has changed now. Why are they telling him that his mother can no longer be a company secretary for his new company?
Okay, so with his situation, the introduction of the New Companies Act changed the dynamics, and the registry is strictly enforcing some of these provisions pertaining to company secretaries, right? So in 2018, there was no clearly defined qualification or criteria to meet before you are appointed as a company secretary during incorporation of a business. So in 2018, the law was a bit open, and probably that's why his mom was able to act as a company secretary then. But with the introduction of the New Companies Act, all statutory requirements and provisions pertaining to membership, directorship, secretaryship, and other key organizational structures of the company ought to be modified to reflect the new changes, right? So that should answer his question. In 2018, there were no clearly defined rules, but post-2019, the Companies Act clearly stated the criteria to be met to become a company secretary. And some of the requirements are the fact either you're a lawyer, barrister, solicitor, you belong to ICSA or ICA. These are professional bodies, okay, Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators, and then we also have the Institute of Chartered Accountants in Ghana. So if you belong to any of them, you are qualified to act as a company secretary for any company limited by shares or limited by guarantee. And also, the New Companies Act has opened the gates a bit, because if you look at the first provision, it talks about an individual who has a professional qualification or tertiary qualification and has the necessary skills and expertise to function as a company secretary. So if you look at this provision, you could tell it's quite open, because at that point, who really determines whether you are fit enough to act as a company secretary? So far as you've had you've studied a course or you've studied a subject which relates to corporate governance, you are qualified to act, but it's still a provision. And then we also have any member of a professional body, right? And then if the most important one is if you have been trained or supervised by a qualified company secretary for a period of at least 3 years, you do get to act as a company secretary.
Okay.
So I think the New Companies Act clearly states four provisions to act, and that's why he's hit a roadblock.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So if I understand you, you're saying that by the New Companies Act, in order for anyone to become a company secretary,
Yeah.
that person must either be a lawyer,
Yeah.
an accountant, a chartered secretary.
Not just an accountant.
No, it has to be a chartered accountant. So the person has to be a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants. And then the secretary too, not just any secretary. You've got to be a member of the Institute of the Chartered Secretary.
Yeah, but there's a loophole with that provision. So what the law says doesn't only mean that the individual has to be chartered. So let's say if I'm a chartered accountant or a chartered secretary and I own a company secretarial department, by association, anyone who is working under me or the company is qualified to act as a company secretary, because
if you've trained that person for 3 years. So you're saying that
for 3 years.
There's that opening.
So my membership covers the firm. That's it.
It covers the firm to the extent that the people who work in your firm will work under you for 3 years. So they should have trained
to be qualified
to act
as individual corporate secretaries. But if we are talking about corporate secretaries, the name of my firm, right, could be on your incorporation documents, and by association, everyone in there is technically a company secretary because my membership covers the firm.
Yes.
Right.
So what I know has been done in this Companies Act, or has been introduced, that I find also interesting, and which I find also opening a leeway, is the fact that once you are a body corporate acting as a company secretary, you should have at least one member, okay, being qualified, being in the 4 categories that we've mentioned.
Yeah.
And so assuming that since you are a chartered secretary and then you work, you have an entity or a body corporate that provides the service, okay. Once you are in there, everybody that works with the body corporate, because the body corporate itself is what is becoming the company secretary.
Yeah.
Because you work there with your qualification, it is deemed that the body corporate itself is also qualified.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Now, I want to understand, a lot of people think company secretary comes up only when they are completing their forms for incorporation.
Yeah.
You know, so they see it that it starts and ends at the time of incorporation. You know, and after that, they don't hear of them anywhere. And that is the reason why we had the problem that we had in the past. So anyone could incorporate their company, use their sister, their mother, or someone who doesn't even have the qualification
just to bypass the law.
Exactly. I think why that we have that issue is because we do not understand who a company secretary is. Right. Can you tell me who a company secretary is?
Let me just put it in simple terms. A company secretary is the conscience of the company, right? So, although the company secretary is appointed by the board of directors, he or she is not accountable to the board or the shareholders, but the company itself. There are some nuances in there. What I mean by this is, directors may act have fiduciary duties to act in the best interest of the company, right? Shareholders obviously need their wealth to be maximized, and the directors ensure that their wealth is maximized. Then here comes the company secretary. The company secretary maintains the statutory registers, right? Keeps and maintains it, and has a neutral position, regardless of who is on the board or who is not, regardless of who joins the company as a member or a shareholder. So your position here is to serve the company in the best way possible. Mm-hmm. This is why you advise companies on the best ethical practices that help them meet their key objectives, right? So I'll just say a company secretary has an extensive role to play in a company. And most people are not aware who a company secretary is. But let's take decision making, for instance. The company secretary is very key in the decision making process of a company. What we mean by this is he's responsible for organizing and coordinating board meetings, board and shareholder meetings. So a meeting cannot be held without a company secretary. And in Ghana, it's mandatory for a company to have its company secretary. Unlike other jurisdictions, in the UK, it's not mandatory for private companies to have company secretaries. But if it's a public company, yeah, you are required to have a company secretary. In Ghana, however, all limited by share companies, limited by guarantee companies are required to have company secretaries. So if you are looking at the legality of it, that's the first thing we need to talk about. It's mandatory. Then we can talk about the functional part of the company secretary, which has to do with the decision-making process, preparing notices, agendas, circulating it to all the directors of the company, ensuring that there is a sufficient flow of information between the board members and the shareholders, okay, and also liaise constantly with the chairman to ensure that well-informed decisions are made.
Okay. One thing that I think we should clarify is the fact that the company secretary itself, or him or herself, does not make the help.
No,
it's not a decision.
Yeah. So for instance, that's why I said the decision-making process.
Okay.
The company secretary is only in the meeting to coordinate the affairs, right? Advise the board on the best corporate governance principles, and you need to ensure that the right things are done by ensuring compliance to the Companies Act, the company's constitution, as well as other regulatory laws applicable to the company, right? So every company has regulations, or let's say constitution, right? And the constitution clearly states the powers, limitations directors and shareholders have in the company, as well as the arrangements regarding transactions, and also, most importantly, conflict resolution. But the question here is, who ensures that these clauses, bylaws, provisions are adhered to as the company secretary, right? The board obviously has to take the best decisions on behalf of the company.
Right. So let's go back to Kwabena's situation.
Yeah.
Okay. Kwabena's first question, I think we've answered it. The second one, he's saying that, I think partly we've answered, because he's saying that what do company secretaries do that his mother
There's a lot company secretaries do.
will not be able to do?
There's a lot. So I spoke about organizing, coordinating meetings. I spoke about compliance. The company secretary has to ensure compliance by always checking if the obligations of the companies are duly met. So if you take a limited liability company, for instance, right, you are required to file your annual returns once a year. So the company secretary sends reminders and is heavily involved in the filing of the accounts process. When a company prepares its accounts, right, and audits its accounts, it has 42 days, within 42 days, to dispatch its balance sheet, reports, financial statement to the members for consideration and adoption. And to do that, you need to hold a board meeting, or alternatively, you can use written resolutions to approve these accounts. After it's duly considered and approved by the board, then it's sent to the members, that's the shareholders, to give a final approval of the accounts. Then it can be adopted, right? The key role here of the company secretary is to ensure that a board meeting is held. And within the board meeting, any two of the directors are authorized to sign the accounts on behalf of the company, right? As I said earlier, it could be held through a fiscal board meeting or by written resolutions, right? So the board approval could be done by written resolution or at a meeting, And then the shareholder approval, adopting the accounts also can be done either way, right? And then an AGM is supposed to be held, annual general meeting must be held every year by the company, right? To discuss, remunerate the auditors, appoint new auditors. So the annual general, those all parties who are entitled to attend the annual general meeting, which are the auditors, the director, shareholders, company secretary, any other concerned party within the company, can decide to agree to waive the meeting and pass and consider adopt the account with a written resolution, or hold an annual general meeting physically, right? So these are processes that cannot be executed without a company secretary. See, it's very complex when you look at it.
Yeah, I get you. Because from listening to you and knowing the law, and also in my experience in practice, we know that you and I know that it's a technical role. Because you are an officer of the company, and your role is determined by law. It is not just, a lot of the times when people see company secretaries, they are only thinking of the administrative side.
Absolutely.
That someone will sit and write minutes. Yes, minutes taking and minutes keeping is also a company secretary's role, but it doesn't end there. As you rightly said, when decisions are supposed to be taken, even the meetings themselves where the decisions are taken, it is a director or a member, depending on the type of the meeting that is going to be held, who will requisition or summon the secretary to call the meeting or to convene the meeting. So the company secretary's role is not just administrative as it has been made to see. The company secretary is very key. And as you've rightly said, the company secretary is the conscience of the company. Because a lot of the times, when it comes to shareholder meetings, we have stakes are high because shareholders are obviously thinking about a return on their investment. And so the company secretary becomes the ethical mind. The company secretary tells them, this is how the law says we are supposed to go. That is the reason why I agree with what the law is right now. That not anybody can
act as a company
secretary. But because a lot of the times people just use people's names to incorporate companies and meetings are not held, at the end of the year, they go and file annual returns or sometimes even waive it, get their auditors to sign a resolution with them and waive them and go and file something that.
But they always hit roadblocks. So
they always do. It always comes back to bite them. So the role of the company secretary, I agree with you, is very, very key and technical, more than what we've been seeing in practice. So let's move to the third question. The third question is, so what of my existing company? Do I need to meet the new requirements for company secretaries for that one too? Kwabena is asking. I mean, I think he wants to know whether he has to change from his mother and find a qualified secretary to take up the role.
He definitely has to. He has to, because and this is why the registry has issued out notices to all companies to update their records.
Okay.
Right. So even with the name, there's a new amendment in the Companies Act that says companies must end with LTD or company limited, and the registry is even in the notice that was issued, I think in 2020, was advising companies to update the name of their the last part of their names. So yeah, it's I mean, he was able to incorporate the business in 2018, but to conform with the current changes, he has to file an amendment. Yes, or he needs to get someone who is qualified enough to best act in the interest of the company. So yeah, that's.
And I think one thing to add to that is that the qualification too must be what the law has prescribed.
It has to.
You have to. Kwabena doesn't have a choice.
He doesn't have a choice. And I like what the registry is doing now. Now most of the company officers scrutinize. Back in the day, they just accepted anyone who was presented as a company secretary. But these days, I've seen a lot of transactions being rejected by virtue of the fact that the people stated on the documents do not meet the criteria. And I think that's a good direction we are heading.
And to add to that again is the new forms. These days, when you're filing, you're completing a form for incorporation or to make any relevant change, you see that the part of the company secretary, you see that they've specified what category of qualification are you falling under. You know,
and they've also stated the section in the Companies Act that relates to that requirement in, I think, one of the columns.
Yes, a column beside it.
So if you doubt it, you could look it up for yourself.
So the role of a company secretary is not, I mean, as we've discussed, is not anything to be trifled with. It's
very important. Like, I don't know, we're discussing earlier about the statutory registers and books. You know, as a company, after you are incorporated, the statutory books must be made available to the public for inspection. And this is why we do filings at the registry every year. We file annual returns, right? And to talk about the statutory registers, we have 4 key main registers, which can only be updated by the company secretary. Nobody else can do that. Because even if there's, let's say, an acquisition or merger in a company, right? The only one with the authority or authorized to update the register is the company secretary. And all these will have to be supported by the legal documents, the deeds, the resolutions, right? So at this point, if a company is being run without a company secretary, who handles the books? We have the register of directors and secretary. This register contains details of each director, their residential address, postal address, the nature of appointment, and it tells whether when they were appointed and when they resigned.
Their consents?
Everything in there relating to the director, right? And then we also have the register of transfers. So, I mean, if it's a limited by share company, at each point in time, there could be an alteration of capital, or there could be new shareholders within the company. And as a result, shares will have to be transferred. There's a register that captures all these transactions, right? And then the most important one is the register of members and shareholding ledger. Now, this is a very sensitive document, because personally, as a company secretary, I do get requests from investment bankers worldwide asking for that document, and they require the certified ones. You get it? Because that document will give you information about the commitments made, capital commitments made in the company, the number of shares owned by each shareholder, whether it's fully paid, partially paid, or it's unpaid, whether it was transferred. It gives you basically everything about the capital formation in the company, as well as the shareholding structure, right? And it cannot be updated if the supporting documents are not provided.
You require the supporting documents. You require even the understanding.
Yeah.
I mean, when I remember,
it's a form people really can't fill, because it's. I always tell people it's like a book. When you take the statutory register of members and shareholding ledger, and you go through each column, you could tell what happened in the company since its genesis, right?
Of course.
Because you know how many shares he acquired at the point of incorporating the business, when it was transferred, who came at what point in time, who was able to pay all of his shares, who transferred what amount to this new shareholder, and how many shareholders we have in the company, the allotment. It has everything. So you could, if you are business minded, or you have a very good understanding of the numbers, you could take the register of members and understand the history of the company, right? You could know what happened throughout the years of the company. And it's no joke. I'm telling you, sometimes you need to explain it to people, because all they say is numbers, but it's sequential. It makes sense when you actually understand how numbers move between the shareholders.
Another example is even the register for directors' interests.
Yes,
which is also very key.
Very important. So the register of directors' interest. This is another register most companies don't keep.
They don't even keep it.
They don't keep it.
They don't even know they're supposed to be keeping it.
Yeah, they don't even know. But in my capacity, I get to act for high-profile companies and multinationals, and they are very keen on keeping these type of documents, because it could come back and bite you in the ass one day.
It can, because, for instance, a lot of our companies in Ghana started, let's say, by two people with a close connection.
Yeah.
And then they themselves are the directors and they are the shareholders. And they have contracts that they have interest in, that they
Conflict of
enter
interest,
into,
yeah.
that they are supposed to disclose, to the company and get authorization and consent and pass resolutions that they don't even know they're supposed to be doing. And so they sit there and then wait till something happens. And then everyone is in trouble. You know, the person who is sitting there as a director who didn't keep the register, the person who is sitting there as a company secretary, every officer of the company gets penalized when things go bad. So it is very, very important that the company secretary is alive to the nature of their
And one
role.
important thing I would like people to know is the register as the final, is the certified document that solidifies the status of the company, right? You only file it at the registry to update your records there.
Of course, because the registry is not part of your
Absolutely.
day-to-day transactions or daily. So that is how you inform them that this is what we are doing.
Absolutely. So, and this is why auditors always seek clarification from company secretaries when they are done auditing the accounts with regards to the composition of the company, whether changes have been made, what's the current shareholding structure. And the only person who can provide you with credible information is the company secretary, because he or she is the one who maintains the books, right? And he is the one who determines what goes in there, what comes out.
That's right.
So even if, let's say, there's been an alteration in capital, right, or a company, there's been any significant change within the company, if there are resolutions, there are share transfer deeds, everything has been duly executed by parties and it's not entered into the statutory register, the transaction is considered not completed.
Right.
That's it. Without those transactions entered into the register, it's considered as not accepted by the directors. And this is why if a company wants to issue new shares, or let's say transfer shares, always the directors need to authorize the company secretary to update the register. It's very important. Maintaining the register is very, very important.
Of course.
And I have so many examples where we go back and forth with investors. I mean, you have emails, you have people sending you emails from South Africa, some from London, some are sending you from Luxembourg, and they are trying to dictate to you what to do. So the point is, who do you listen to? And if you're not qualified, if you don't know what you are doing, you'll be easily influenced to do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Because I remember there was a time where working on a new, I think it was an acquisition. There were no resolutions in place which had been executed. There were no share transfer deeds. But I kept getting calls from the acquiring party to amend the register. And I asked them, based on what? Like, what's the legality of it? I'm aware there's a transaction going. I'm the one actually executing the transaction. But so far as I'm concerned, it's not been completed. We don't even have the signed share transfer deeds in place. So how then do I? So if I was someone who wasn't let's say well knowledgeable in this company secretarial practice, I would have easily folded to these investors and done the wrong thing. Like I would have changed the particulars in the registers, although the transaction had not been completed.
And that could certainly have hurt the relationship between you, or it could be even detrimental to the interest of the company.
I could be sued.
Thank you very, very, very much. Hassan, you know it. You and I, when we meet, we can go on and on and on because of our love and our passion for what we do. Thank you so much, Hassan, for joining us tonight. Viewers, you have heard Mr. Hassan Rashad. Being a company secretary is just not entering anybody's name on your incorporation documents. A company secretary is also not just someone who will come there to be an administrative personnel. A company secretary is bigger than that. A company secretary is an officer of the company. The role of a company secretary is by statute, by law. So company secretaries are supposed to be alive to what they do. It's a very technical role. So if there's any business watching us tonight, you've got to be very careful. You cannot allow just anyone to be your company secretary. They could hurt you. Once again, thank you very much, viewers, for joining us. And thanks once again to Chic by Silver, our proud sponsor. I hope you get to join us this and every Tuesday for Evolve Business with Boatema. See you.